I was walking home late that night, the kind of late where the city had already settled into its quiet, eerie lull. The streetlights flickered, casting long, trembling shadows over the pavement. My apartment was only a few blocks away, and I was lost in thought, barely paying attention to my surroundings when I saw her. A small figure stood alone near the entrance of a closed bakery. The girl couldn't have been older than 9 or 10. She was wearing a thin, dirty hoodie, its sleeves far too long for her, covering most of her small hands. Her sneakers were scuffed, the laces dragging. Her blonde hair, tangled and unkempt, framed a face that was pale under the dim streetlights. But it was her eyes that unsettled me the most, wide, unfocused, darting nervously as if expecting something terrible to happen at any moment. I stopped a few steps away, not wanting to startle her. "Hey, sweetheart, are you okay?" My voice came out softer than usual, instinctively careful. She flinched, taking half a step back. I don't know," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. That wasn't the answer I expected. Not yes, not no, just complete uncertainty. "Are you lost?" I asked. "Where are your parents?" Emma bit her lower lip, hesitating. Then, she gave the faintest shake of her head. "I don't have any." That stopped me cold. I crouched slightly to be more at her eye level. "What do you mean? Do you live around here?" Another shake of the head. I exhaled slowly, glancing up and down the street. There was no one else around, no sign that she was waiting for someone. Just this fragile, exhausted little girl standing alone in the cold night. "Okay," I said carefully. "Let's get you somewhere safe, all right?" She didn't move. I took a step closer, but she tensed up. "I don't know you," she murmured, barely audible. "Fair enough," I said, holding up my hands in a placating gesture. "I'm not gonna hurt you. But you can't stay out here all night. It's not safe. If you want, we can call the police together." That got a reaction. She shook her head violently. "No police," she said, her voice sharp now urgent. That set off alarm bells in my head. "Why not?" She didn't answer. I took a slow breath. "Okay, no police. But you can't stay outside. How about this? I live just down the street. You can sit on my couch for a bit, get warm, and we'll figure things out from there. No pressure. If you want to leave, I won't stop you." For a long moment, she just stared at me, those big, frightened eyes searching my face. Then, finally, she nodded. The walk back was silent. Emma followed a step behind me, like she was afraid to get too close. I kept glancing back, making sure she was still there. Inside my apartment, she hesitated at the doorway, scanning the space like she was preparing for the worst. "It's just me here," I assured her. "You're safe." Emma nodded slowly and stepped inside. I turned up the heat and grabbed a blanket from the couch, offering it to her. She took it without a word and curled up at the farthest end of the sofa, wrapping the fabric tightly around herself. "Are you hungry?" I asked. She nodded. I heated up some leftover soup. She watched me closely the whole time, like she didn't quite trust me yet. When I placed the bowl in front of her, she hesitated, then ate like she hadn't had a proper meal in days. I sat across from her, waiting until she was done. Then, gently I asked, "Emma, where have you been staying?" Her grip tightened on the blanket. "Different places." "What about before that?" She shook her head. "I don't remember." I frowned. "You don't remember where you lived?" She hesitated. "Not really." I let out a slow breath. "Okay. Tomorrow we'll talk to someone who can help." Emma's eyes flickered with fear. "I don't want to go back." "Back where?" She didn't answer. The next morning I called social services. They listened, took down details, and promised to send someone as soon as possible. But there was a problem. Resources were stretched thin, and there was no immediate placement available. "She'll have to stay with you for now," the woman on the phone said. "For how long?" "It's hard to say. It could be a few days. Maybe longer." I glanced over at Emma, who was sitting on the floor, absently petting my cat Daisy. She still looked wary, like she didn't quite believe she was safe yet. "All right," I said finally. "I'll take care of her." The first night, she had nightmares. I woke up to muffled crying and found her curled up on the couch, shaking. "Emma," I whispered. "Are you okay?" She sniffled and nodded, but I could see her hands gripping the blanket too tightly. I sat on the edge of the couch. "Do you want to talk about it?" She shook her head. I hesitated, then said, "You don't have to be scared here. Whatever happened before, you're safe now." She was silent for a long moment. Then, in a barely audible voice, she said, "That's what they said last time too." A chill ran down my spine. Over the next few days, I tried to get Emma to open up. Sometimes she'd relax, even smile a little. Other times, she'd go quiet, eyes dark with something I couldn't quite place. One afternoon, I found her sitting in my bedroom, staring at the window. "Emma?" I called softly. She turned to me, and for the first time, I saw something sharp in her expression. Something wary. "Someone was outside," she said quietly. My stomach dropped. "Who?" She shook her head. "I don't know. But they were watching." I ran to the window, heart pounding. The street below was empty. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was telling the truth. I was walking home late at night when I saw her. A little girl, standing under a dim street light near the bus stop. She was wearing a thin sweater, her hair was messy, and her face looked lost. I slowed down, looking at her more closely. Before I even realized it, I had already turned around and was walking toward her. "Hey, are you lost?" I asked gently. She lifted her big, dark eyes to me. "I don't know," she said quietly. I noticed that her hands were trembling, either from the cold or from fear. I wasn't sure. "What's your name?" I asked, trying not to scare her even more. "Emma," she answered after a short pause. "Where are your parents?" "I don't know." I looked around. The street was nearly empty. No sign that anyone was looking for her. "Do you know your address? I can give you a ride home." She shook her head. "Okay," I said, though the situation was far from okay. "Do you have any relatives you can go to?" Silence again. At that moment, I knew I couldn't just leave her there. I pulled out my phone and called child services. The operator listened politely but gave me the answer I had feared. "We're short on resources right now. The nearest shelter is full, and finding a temporary home this late is difficult. Would you be able to take her in for the night? We'll come by tomorrow to sort things out." I looked at the girl standing there, staring at the ground. "All right," I sighed. She got into my car without a word. My apartment wasn't very big, but it was warm and comfortable. I offered Emma a hot bath and found some old pajamas that once belonged to my niece. She accepted everything without protest, as if this was normal for her. "Are you hungry?" She nodded. I made her a sandwich and poured her a glass of milk. She ate slowly and carefully, as if afraid the food might be taken away. "Have you been alone for a long time?" She shrugged. "I don't know," she answered again. I realized I wouldn't get much out of her tonight. "All right. You can sleep here tonight, and tomorrow we'll figure out what to do next." She only nodded. I set up a bed for her in the guest room. She lay down and closed her eyes, but I could hear her shifting around for a long time. Later that night, I woke up to a faint rustling sound. She was standing in my doorway. "What's wrong?" "I don't want to be alone," she whispered. I sighed. "You can sleep on the couch in my room if you want." She walked over silently and wrapped herself in the blanket on the couch. The next morning, I called child services again. "We're working on it," they told me. "But we don't have a placement for her yet. Can you keep her for a few more days?" I wasn't thrilled about the idea, but what else could I do? "Fine," I agreed. Emma barely spoke, but she watched me carefully. She was well behaved, ate when I offered her food, and politely said thank you. But every time I left the room, she would appear a few minutes later, as if afraid to be alone. One afternoon, I came home from work and found her in the kitchen. She was hiding something behind her back. "What do you have there?" She didn't answer. "Emma, show me." Slowly, she pulled out a photo of me, but something was different. She had drawn herself next to me and written "Mom and me" at the bottom. "That's a nice drawing," I said, unsure how to react. She smiled and suddenly hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Mom." I froze. "Emma, I'm not your mom," I said carefully. She stepped back, her expression changing. "But I want you to be," she said. That unsettled me. The next day, I got a call from her school. "Ms. Lynch," the secretary said. "We need to talk." I went in and met with the principal. "We noticed something strange," he said. "Emma has been telling people that she's been living with you for a long time." "What?" "That's not true. She claims that you adopted her." I felt uneasy. "This must be a mistake." "We thought so too," the principal said. "But she's been telling the other kids that you're her mother." This was getting out of control. I called child services again. "This is serious," I insisted. "She's making up stories. This could be dangerous." "We understand," they said. "But we still don't have a place for her. Please, just hold on a little longer." Hold on? How could I hold on when this little girl had convinced herself that I was her mother? That evening, I decided to confront her. "Emma, why did you tell your school that we've been living together for a long time?" She was silent. "Emma, you can't make up things like that." She lifted her head and looked at me with her big, dark eyes. "But I want it to be true," she said. I realized this wasn't just temporary anymore. It was becoming something much, much more complicated. The first time it truly scared me was when I tried to leave for work. It had been nearly 2 weeks since I found Emma, and child services still hadn't found a home for her. She was becoming more attached, more possessive. I could feel her watching me constantly, clinging to me whenever I was home, but I told myself she was just afraid of being abandoned again. That morning, I was running late. I grabbed my bag and hurried to the door, only to find it wouldn't open. I jiggled the handle, pushed against it, nothing. That's when I noticed the chair wedged under the doorknob. "Emma." I turned around, my voice sharper than I intended. She stood a few feet away, her hands clasped together, her face expressionless. "Why did you block the door?" She didn't answer. "Emma, move the chair." "I need to go." "No." A chill ran through me. "Emma, I'm serious. I have to go to work." Her lips trembled. "You're going to leave me." I sighed, forcing myself to stay calm. "I'm not leaving you. But I have responsibilities, and you can't just." Tears welled up in her eyes. "If you leave, I won't be here when you come back." The threat was clear. "Emma," I said carefully, "you can't do this. Move the chair." She shook her head. I stepped forward to move it myself, but as soon as I reached for it, she let out a piercing scream, so loud and sudden that I flinched. "No. You can't leave me. she shrieked, her voice raw and panicked. I had no choice. I grabbed the chair and yanked it away. As soon as I did, Emma threw herself at me, grabbing onto my waist with an iron grip. Please, please don't leave me, she sobbed. I pried her arms off me, my heart racing. I'll be back later, I said firmly. This is not okay, Emma. She stood there, tears streaking her face, as I finally got the door open and rushed out. Things got worse after that. At work, I struggled to focus. My boss, Angela, had already noticed something was wrong. You've been distracted, she said one afternoon, peering at me over the rim of her coffee cup. I'm just dealing with something at home. She raised an eyebrow. Does this have anything to do with that little girl you mentioned? I had made the mistake of telling her about Emma in passing. I had said she was staying with me temporarily, that child services was handling it. You're not planning on keeping her, are you? No, I said quickly. It's complicated. But she's starting to act out. Angela set her coffee down. Listen, I don't want to pry, but this sounds messy. You need to be careful. I nodded, but I didn't tell her everything. I didn't tell her about how, when I came home that night, Emma was sitting in the dark, staring at the front door like she had been waiting for hours. Or how, when I tried to take her to the grocery store, she threw a fit in the middle of the frozen food aisle, sobbing, "Don't make me go away," loud enough that people stopped to stare. Or how my neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, had pulled me aside one morning and said, "That girl, she watches people through the window." It's unsettling. I decided to see a lawyer. His name was Richard Hale, an older man with tired eyes. I just need to understand my options, I told him. I didn't sign up to be a foster parent, and this is getting out of control. He listened as I explained everything. How Emma was refusing to let me leave, how she was telling people I was her mother, how child services kept delaying things. You need to document everything, he advised. If this escalates, you'll need proof that you tried to set boundaries. And what if she refuses to leave when they finally find a placement? His expression darkened. Then it could get complicated. That wasn't what I wanted to hear. The breaking point came at a cafe. I thought taking her out might help, something normal, a small trip to get some fresh air. I should have known better. We were standing in line when I told her I had to use the restroom. I'll be right back, I said. Stay here. She grabbed my wrist hard. No, she whispered. Emma, it's just for a minute. She wouldn't let go. People were beginning to notice. Emma, you're hurting me, I said, my voice low but firm. Her grip tightened. Then, suddenly, she screamed. Not just a cry, an ear-splitting, hysterical scream that made everyone in the cafe turn to look. Don't leave me, she wailed. Please, Mommy, don't leave me. I froze. A woman behind me gasped. A man at a nearby table stood up. The barista stopped mid-order. And I realized in that moment what this looked like. A little girl, sobbing, begging her mother not to leave her. A woman trying to pull away. I saw the suspicion in their eyes. Emma, stop, I hissed, panic creeping into my voice. She collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Someone, a middle-aged woman, stepped toward me. Is she okay? She's fine, I said quickly. She has attachment issues. Emma sobbed louder. I felt trapped. If I walked away, I looked heartless. If I stayed, I fed into whatever game she was playing. I need to take her home, I said, bending down to lift her up. She clung to me, her little body shaking. I carried her out of the cafe, feeling the stares burning into my back. That night, I called a therapist. Dr. Marissa Clark listened carefully as I explained what was happening. This isn't normal, right? I asked. She's 9 years old, not a toddler. This isn't just separation anxiety. It sounds more like an attachment disorder, Dr. Clark said. She may have experienced severe abandonment in the past. But that doesn't mean you should let her control you. What do I do? You need to set firm boundaries. Right now, she's testing how far she can go. If you don't stop this behavior, it will escalate. I knew she was right. But I also knew that setting boundaries with Emma would not be easy. And I was terrified of what she might do next. When the call finally came, I felt something close to relief. This is Olivia Marshall from Child Services, the voice on the other end said. We found a foster family for Emma. For a moment, I just stood there, gripping the phone. You found a placement? I repeated, almost not believing it. Yes. A couple in Bridgewood, the Sandersons. They've fostered before, and they're open to adoption if things go well. That's great, I said, but my stomach twisted. We'll come by tomorrow morning to pick her up, Olivia continued. It's best to make this transition as smooth as possible. Smooth. I nearly laughed. Nothing about this had been smooth. After I hung up, I turned to see Emma standing in the hallway, her small figure barely illuminated by the dim light from the kitchen. I hadn't even noticed her there. What did they say? She asked, her voice quiet but sharp. I hesitated. They found a family for you, Emma. You'll be moving tomorrow. Her hands clenched into fists. I'm not going. I sighed. Emma, we talked about this. This was always temporary. You're lying, she snapped. You said you wouldn't leave me. I never said that. You meant it. Her voice rose, trembling with rage. I took a deep breath. Emma, this isn't up for discussion. You need a real home with parents who can take care of you properly. You are my home, she screamed. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I tried to steady myself. No, Emma. I was just helping until child services found the right place for you. And now they have. She was breathing hard, her whole body tense. I had never seen her like this. So furious, so raw. You're just like the rest of them, she whispered. Emma, that's not fair. You don't care about me. That's not true. She turned and ran to her room, slamming the door so hard that one of the picture frames on the wall rattled. I closed my eyes, exhaling shakily. Tomorrow was going to be a battle. The next morning, Olivia arrived with a man I hadn't met before, Michael Sanderson, the foster father. He was in his late 40s, with a kind face and a sturdy build. He smiled when he introduced himself, but I saw the way his eyes scanned the apartment, already assessing what kind of environment Emma had been living in. Where is she? Olivia asked. I glanced toward the hallway. She's locked herself in her room. Michael nodded, as if he had seen this before. Would you like me to try? I hesitated. Let me talk to her first. I walked to Emma's door and knocked gently. Emma, it's time. Silence. I tried the doorknob. Locked. Emma opened the door. No response. I sighed. If you don't open the door, Olivia and Michael will have to do it for you. A long pause. Then slowly the lock clicked. I pushed the door open and found her sitting on the bed, knees pulled to her chest, her face stone cold. You don't have to do this, she said. Yes, I do. She stared at me. You don't love me, Emma. You're just throwing me away like everyone else. I swallowed hard. That's not true. Then why are you making me leave? Because this is what's best for you. She shook her head, her breath uneven. I hate you. The words stung more than I expected. I stepped closer, but she flinched away. Emma, I know you're scared, but the Sandersons are good people. They want to take care of you. I don't want them, she snapped. I want you. I felt my own throat tighten. You're going to be okay? I said softly. No, I won't. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she wiped it away angrily, as if refusing to let me see her cry. I heard Olivia step into the doorway. Emma, it's time to go. Emma looked at me one last time, her expression a mix of sadness and betrayal. Then slowly, she stood up. I expected her to lash out again, to scream, to fight. But she didn't. She walked past me without a word. I followed as she grabbed the small bag Olivia had brought for her. She didn't take anything else. Not the drawing she had made of us, not the clothes I had given her. Just the bag. Michael gently placed a hand on her shoulder as they walked toward the door, but she shrugged him off. Before she stepped outside, she turned back to me. Her dark eyes burned with something I couldn't quite place, anger, grief, maybe even hatred. And then she was gone. That night, the apartment felt unbearably empty. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched cup of tea in front of me. My whole body ached with exhaustion, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. I had done the right thing, hadn't I? She needed a stable home, a real family. I couldn't give that to her. And yet, I thought of the way she had looked at me before she left. As if I had betrayed her. As if I had broken her. I took a shaky breath, pressing my palms against my temples. It was over. It had to be. Then why did it still feel so wrong? The first few nights after Emma left, I barely slept. The apartment was too quiet. I caught myself listening for the soft creak of the floorboards outside my bedroom, expecting to see her small figure standing in the doorway, watching me. But she wasn't there. Every morning I woke up thinking about her, wondering if she was adjusting, if she was still angry, if she was happy. I tried to settle back into my old life. Work was easier now. I wasn't constantly distracted, wasn't leaving early to handle a crisis at home. My boss Angela even commented on it. Whatever you were dealing with, I'm glad it's sorted, she said one day. You seem more like yourself again. I forced a smile. Yeah, things are back to normal. But were they? I wasn't expecting to see her again. It was a Saturday morning, about 3 weeks after she left. I had gone to a farmer's market in Bridgewood, hoping to distract myself with fresh produce and the smell of baked bread. And then I saw her. She was with a woman I didn't recognize. A petite, blonde woman in her late 30s, wearing a soft blue sweater. The foster mother. Mrs. Sanderson. Emma was holding her hand. I stopped walking. My breath caught in my throat. She looked fine. She wasn't clinging to Mrs. Sanderson the way she used to cling to me. She wasn't scanning the crowd with anxious, searching eyes. She looked calm. Happy even. I took a small step forward before I even realized what I was doing. I wanted to say something. Maybe just a quiet hello. But then Emma looked up and saw me. Our eyes met. For a split second, I thought she might run to me. But instead, she stiffened. Her grip on Mrs. Sanderson's hand tightened. She didn't smile. She didn't say a word. She just turned her head and looked away. A strange, heavy weight settled in my chest. I forced myself to keep walking. I told myself this was good. She had moved on. So why did it feel like she had just erased me completely? A few months passed. Slowly, I adjusted. I stopped expecting to see Emma in my apartment, stopped waiting for the phone to ring with a problem I had to solve. Life went on. And then, one evening, there was a letter in my mailbox. It was handwritten, the envelope small and a little crooked, like it had been sealed in a hurry. The return address was from Child Services. I already knew who it was from before I even opened it. Dear Lillian, I didn't know if I should write to you. I didn't think you would want to hear from me. But Olivia from Child Services said maybe you would. I wanted to say thank you. I was really mad at you. I still am a little bit. But I know you were trying to help me. I just didn't want to leave. I like the Sandersons. They have a dog named Milo. He sleeps on my bed sometimes. I have my own room now, and it has yellow walls. They let me help pick the color. I don't cry as much anymore. I hope you don't hate me. Emma. I read the letter 3 times before setting it down on the table. My hands were shaking. She was okay. She wasn't begging to come back. She wasn't still angry, not completely at least. She was moving forward. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt an ache deep in my chest that I couldn't quite describe. I sat on the letter for over a week before responding. I didn't know what to say. How do you write to a child who once called you mom, even though you never were? In the end, I kept it simple. Dear Emma, thank you for your letter. I don't hate you. I never did. I hope you know that. I'm glad you're doing well. I'm glad you like your new family. And I think yellow walls sound perfect. Take care of yourself. Lillian. I mailed it through child services. I didn't expect a response. She didn't need me anymore. Time passed. The memories of Emma didn't disappear, but they settled. I went to therapy. I talked through everything with Dr. Clark, about the guilt, the fear, the confusion. You did everything you could, she told me one afternoon. But Emma needed more than what you could give her. I just wish I had handled things differently. You handled them the best way you knew how. I wasn't sure if that was true, but I was trying to believe it. I learned a lot from Emma. About boundaries. About love. About how sometimes doing the right thing doesn't feel right at all. But most of all, I learned that some people come into your life only for a moment. And sometimes you have to let them go, even when it hurts.